Well, hello, listeners, and welcome back to the Purposeful Marketing Podcast. We got the trio back, Aaron, Mary, James. I'm excited to be back. And today, this topic is going to be important going into the next 2 months as Q4 wraps up. We move into Q1 of fiscal year 2023, which is really thinking about your go-to marketing strategy. And how we want to discuss this today is, do marketers make it more complicated than it really is? So to get us started off, I'm really going to pass the buck to Mary just to kind of talk about her thoughts and ideas as the strategist, as I'm planning for goals, results, execution. What are the things that are making it complicated, and why should it be simple? Go ahead, Mary.
Yeah, so I just want to quick shout out to Aaron because we were just chatting before this about this very topic. But we didn't necessarily have a set topic in place, which is, for today's is making the complicated simple. I was just spitballing on some of my strategies for communicating with clients, and he was like, oh, this is a great topic, and here it is. So just shout out to Aaron for being so adept at that kind of thing. I really enjoy that and respect it. But what I was telling Aaron, he was like, hey, what are you experiencing problem-wise, solution-wise as a strategist at Gorilla 76 right now? And I said, you know what? My new strategy that I've come to the conclusion, especially in the past 6 to 9 months, is almost oversimplifying things for my clients. So really forcing things through a very thin barrier. And that barrier is, you are working with Gorilla because we have a go-to-market process that we believe will work for you. And that process is focus. So focus on a specific vertical or an audience segment, focus on, or a single product even. So focus is number one. Number two is conduct deep research within that focus segment. Number three is create content. Number four is distribute that content. And then number five is assess and iterate based on results. So why do we do this? It's because first of all, it's measurable. So we can prove success based on those 5 steps, and we can prove success within each of those steps. It gives us a very easy process to filter decisions through. And in the end, it's scalable. So that's very important to most of our clients. We're working with small to medium-sized businesses. So they're usually wanting to grow, maybe not in any kind of hyper growth stage, but they want to grow. They want to make more money. So this is something that can also be scaled out to other audience segments. So that's my new thing is instead of getting deep in we're doing Facebook with metadata because we can target this really great B2B audience segment. It's no, step back. All we're doing is just taking this great content you have and putting it in a place where your audience spends time. So again, just very, very simple ways to communicate what we do and why we do it.
Love it, Mary. And why I wanted to throw it to you first, because I knew it would be super organized and detailed and clear, because I want to ask James the philosophical question, which is, James, do marketers just make it complicated? And why is that?
I don't know if, marketers just make it complicated. I think that, I don't know the quote. You might know the quote, but, the most elegant, solution is the simplest, or, there is an amount that when someone succeeds at making something simple, people really respond to it. If you can take something that is complicated and make it simple effectively, people really, really respond to it. And I think that's especially true when you are, say, presenting a strategy or a plan to people who have more accountabilities than just approving your plan, who have all kinds of high-level stuff that they've got to do today. So I would argue that we could always make things a little bit simpler, but it takes quite a bit of skill to simplify something that's complicated. And sorry, I just looked away because my dog just yawned in the strangest way. I think, something that I am curious about, and I hope that this doesn't take us too far off track, but I think one way of maybe making thinking about like a go-to-market strategy simple, or any strategy simple, is maybe to think about like, okay, strip away any talk of like the detailed tactics, and just, if you're just deciding like, okay, here's our strategy and here's what we already do, here's what we don't do, and just mark like, okay, we are going to keep doing this, we are going to stop doing this, we are going to start doing this, and just stop it there. And then at any point, you're always working on being 1% better. If we can just get a little better all the time, like, we will be succeeding. I don't know. I wonder if that's a simpler or a more complicated way to handle this, because I've been thinking about, like, I don't know, why do we need to, you don't need to reinvent the wheel constantly. You really just need to get better, and placing so much emphasis on like your annual plan kind of ignores the amount that, like, just focusing on doing the little things right all the time can give you quite a lot of results in any endeavor. And you lose that when you revolve around this like annual cycle. And, every 12 months we have this big, 40-page slide deck. It just seems to me like it kind of pulls people away from the, let's do what we're good at and do it a little bit better.
There's so many great things to unpack there, James. To go back to the question, do marketers make it complicated? The answer is always, it depends. But what I want to break out from that is, I think the reason on a human level of why it's so complicated is we're just being asked to do too much all the time. And I think with what Mary is saying is like, that's a clear, detailed vision and strategy that's in front of you. What often happens in agency and in-house is you are either in charge of one function, one metric, or one execution. And what you don't have, what you're not equipped with, is that clear vision. I think that's why we have a show like this, which is always go back to the why, because it's at an individual level, you're the one who has to ask those questions and then push it back up to leadership. Something we all talk about on the LinkedIn platform is marketing and sales doesn't get along. There's no alignment there. Well, it's part of the leadership's job to show that vision. And then once we have that vision, it's up to us to understand, what are the complicated pieces of it? What's the simple pieces of it? Let's do those things, right? What we're good at. Let's look at our diagnosis. I think this is where the performance marketer and strategist, if that's how your functions work, can work very closely together. It's my job as a performance marketer to really lock in that diagnosis as far as what metrics and goals we are tracking, and equip Mary with, is that working? So we can do what James just said, is essentially, if it's not working, stop doing it. If it is working, do it a little better. Maybe it's that simple. So I'm going to pivot us a different direction, but Mary, I'll let you respond to that too, because I'm going to ask you the next question, Mary, is you were in-house. So if you can kind of explain your experience with what I was just talking about, is it very complicated in-house because you don't have a lot of vision and direction?
Yeah, I think you like totally nailed it. That was perfect. Like, you have this vision, you have a way that you think marketing should be done, or you want to be doing marketing either at your agency or in-house, and you get distracted by something, right? So something comes along, and yeah, it'd be perfect if, everybody followed my 5-step process I just gave you. But yeah, I get questions all the time like, oh, wait, but what about SEO? Hey, can you guys do some print brochures? Like, I get questions like that all the time. And I think the major issue, and I don't know if this is true for all marketers, it might have been true for me as a marketer, and especially as a female maybe, is I suffered a lot with like imposter syndrome. So it was like, should I know SEO? Like, should I be doing print ads? Maybe I should. So then you fall into the trap of like just saying yes because you think that's what you should be doing, when really this was the agreed upon framework. SEO is a great distribution channel, not knocking it as a channel in general. But if it's not part of the distribution section of your go-to-market strategy, then you have to be really clear in communicating that. Like, yes, I think SEO could be a viable option for us, but it's not right now because I don't have the resources to do that. If you're going to expand my budget and I can go hire an SEO agency, sure, we can explore SEO as an option. So I think that's where it really comes into play, is like there's almost like this mix of, as a marketer, I should be doing all of the tactics.
Now, James, as a department head for a valuable marketing function such as content, what do you think about that? I think, do you struggle with your people getting too in the weeds? Do you help push them to the simple? We just need to make content that helps the customer. I'm just trying to get your thoughts on this challenge, seeing if you have it yourself.
I think from the perspective of like the content creator, the problem with the overcomplicated plan that is, gosh, we have to go into so much detail about, how we're going to do every single thing that we're going to do, is it takes the important process of like determining content and determining what content can do, and where that content should, what format that content should be in to achieve X goal. These are things that the person creating the content is uniquely positioned to make that decision. But when the marketing plan is the thing that has to make all those decisions, like when the marketing plan dictates all of that, it just means you've put the decision-making process to like that fuels the content in the hands of the wrong person at the wrong time. Decisions about what, we're going to write about, or, are we going to make a video to talk about this concept, to break this down? Or do we need to like get some graphics? Do we need like visual? Is this something that should be represented visually? How should this be like? That stuff those decisions need to be made by the people that make the content and have the connection to the customer and what the customer wants and understanding of, how to communicate that. The person in charge of the marketing strategy should be using a very different skill set to do a very different set of things. And when the marketing plan is responsible for doing that, you've just made the wrong person make a decision that then just ripples out into the work that you do. So kind of, I don't feel like I have a problem with like the people making the content. If they're struggling with, the weeds of like tactics, and the why, that usually comes from, in my experience, the fact that the decisions, like those decisions were made by someone, not them, when it should have been made by them. And you've just kind of like misplaced responsibility for setting that part of a plan up. And I think that it just makes the person in charge of the plan's job way too complicated. It doesn't make the content creator's job more complicated. It makes it like theoretically simpler, but just harder because you're catching up on context and you're catching up on the why. You've been disconnected from why you're doing the thing that you do.
Yeah, this is really great dialogue because I don't think there's an easy answer. What resonated with me, what you're discussing, James, is like, I think we should even be more simple and intentional with what we're doing and why. And as a marketer, we get so far into the weeds, so far into the tactics, because that's the best way to explain it. I think what you can actually do to change your behavior around this is, instead of starting with the tactic first, always talk about the desired outcome. I think the reason why we don't start with the desired outcome is, at a human level, we don't want to be wrong, right? Is, I need more inbound volume. Here's how we can do it. Even better, let's go higher level. I need more at-bats forming relationships. Great. Now, how do you do it? I would love for us to get even simplified in that way. It reminds me of your post today, Mary, talking about content and distribution. You should do both. I don't even care what the tactics are underneath at this point. It's like, if you don't have that as part of your go-to marketing strategy, you don't have that as part of your plan, you're never going to get better at it. You're never going to do what James said, is like identify what you're good at and do a little more of it. Instead, we're just so far down the weeds into the tactics of, let's start here. I'm going to do retargeting. I'm going to hit a warm audience with this ad. I'm going to create this kind of creative, where we need to be way up here, which is like, what do our customers want? How do we give it to them? Now, again, Mary, you are the person tasked with the go-to-market strategy here in this call. So any response to kind of what James or myself is saying?
No, I mean, I think you nailed it. I think that depending on the client, if that's all you did, honestly, was just create and distribute content, you weren't necessarily analyzing results, you didn't do, your focus or customer research, I'm sure you could do a pretty decent job if your content is really, really good. Like we've had people who have highly technical engineering people on staff. They create amazing content. I'm sure if they just distributed it, they would at least capture some existing audience that didn't know what they did or why they did it. Obviously, the go-to-market strategy is just going to make it happen, number one, faster. And again, it'll give you the why behind it. So, what purposeful marketing is all about. Why are we creating that content? Why are we analyzing it so we can scale it for a business? Yeah, I think you nailed it with like content and distribution. They have to go hand in hand. You have to do both. You have to be thinking about distribution when you're creating the content. And when you're creating the content, you have to be thinking about distribution.
It reminds me of the episode we did about killing the term campaign. I think in a way, this is kind of what we're talking about, is we almost need to kill our definitions because they're making things way too complicated. We don't want to run a campaign. We want to create content, distribute it. We need a campaign to do so. I think if we have more conversations like that, it'll be more simple. I think, again, James, a conversation we've had throughout this podcast, even when it was just you and me, is like this idea about even talking about content, I think is almost too tactical. Like in a way, we know what content's good and what content's bad, but because you're so in the weeds, like it gets so complicated talking about it. You have any thoughts about that? Like, is sometimes content just needs to be simplified as well?
I mean, I think that talking about the problem with it is the people that end up talking about it are not the people that should be. Like, if you're talking about like, oh, like how do we tell if this content's good? That's a discussion that probably should involve multiple people in multiple positions. If we're talking about, oh, like what content should achieve this goal, maybe even you say like on X channel, we need content for X channel. Okay. Well, the person in charge of determining what channels will work for a company is not going to be the same person that can make decisions about what type of content is going to be good. Like that, those are typically roles performed by two different people. Those are very different functions. Like I would think of it as like leadership has the business goals. Leadership should be open with marketing about the business goals. Marketing has the business goals, and there is a marketing leader, probably a strategist, who takes those business goals and says, okay, here is the strategy. This is the high level. This is what we're going to do. Maybe there's a performance marketer. The performance marketer knows what has worked in the past, knows what hasn't worked in the past, works with the strategist to determine, okay, like what are we maybe going to do on a tactical level here? But the content is going to happen regardless. Like you're going to need content no matter what. And what the content is needs to be driven by the customer and communicated out to the team by the person in contact with the customer, who hopefully is the same person that makes the content. It starts to feel too tactical when it's like the strategist talking about what the content should be. That's when it starts to feel too tactical. When it's the content person talking about content with a subject matter expert, it doesn't feel too tactical at all. It feels awesome. It feels natural. It feels like everyone's just doing their job well. So I do think that, if talking about content feels too tactical, it's just the wrong people in the room with the wrong objectives. When people that are making the content or talking about content. Like when I'm in conversations about something like this with other people on my team, all of whom are in the content department, it just feels like we're all trying to make what we do more entertaining, more valuable, and better. It doesn't feel like discussions about like, oh, like why are we talking about like the tactics of blogging? Like it never feels like that, because that's not something that we are accountable for. We're accountable for, are the customers seeking more of this content?
Yeah, I think
that's it. Go ahead, Mary.
Yeah,
rant over.
That's awesome. I think you like totally nailed it. Like, Aaron was just like what got that rant going was, are we like overcomplicating it by even calling it content? And the answer is yeah. Because what are you really trying to do? You're just trying to communicate with a customer. To James's point, like I'm just trying to filter the reason you started your company to your potential audience. Like that's really it, right?
I love this conversation. I think in essence, like this is what I always want. And we're having it right now. So I think when it comes to goals and objectives, I think that's what has to be simple for everything underneath it to be simple. And we know that's an issue. You know, a couple episodes ago, Mary, you and I talked about how to report on goals and why it's so messy. I think if you can take anything out of this episode, it's like push for that, you know, because we don't want to have conversations about what's the best tactical way to get this content in front of someone for X, Y, and Z. That's not fun. What we want to do is talk about what our customers need. I've asked several times, and we've all asked it, is what is the purpose of marketing? It should be what our customers want and what they need, and how do we get it to them? Like it's that simple sometimes. And I think, you know, maybe this can be the ending topic, but we've talked about frameworks and playbooks and strategic narrative and all that. Maybe that's complicated. Maybe it's because we're calling it demand gen versus lead gen versus relationship enablement versus sales, whatever you want to call it. That's even complicating it too. Because at the end of the day, all we're doing is what we need to do for our customers. I'm going to throw that one to you, Mary, because again, you are the person in the room who's going to be really responsible for the go-to market strategy.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. That's usually the most difficult sell on my end. So if I'm like selling a strategy, like selling a plan for a particular phase, that's actually the hardest sell, is like trying to get clients to understand the value of filtering everything through what the customer wants and needs. But I want to hear James's perspective, because he gets to do all like the customer interviews. So he gets like the fun job of filtering the awesome customer insights to the client.
I mean, I think that it's valuable for a company to have goals and objectives for marketing that aren't entirely, do what the customer wants. Like I think that if that was the goal and objective, would marketing do a lot better stuff? Probably, yeah. Like that would be very helpful. It would be very helpful to have more impetus from every player involved to get me in front of a customer. I mean, it would be amazing if there was more impetus across an organization to say, like, let's get these content people talking to customers all the time. Let's be talking to customers all the time. Like that would be great. But I think I don't think you have to make it so simple. I mean, I don't think you need any drastic changes, but I think people need to understand that complicated goals and objectives are going to be achieved through complicated means, and simple goals and objectives are going to be more achievable through simple means. And I think the real problem is that companies have complicated goals and objectives for a marketing team that they equip with very simple resources.
Well said, James. And I think what I want us to do is maybe each go around and kind of talk a little more actionable of like, for your function, how it can be simple. And I can kind of start while you both think, is because performance marketers, we're putting a lot of slide decks together. We're building dashboards. We're reporting on the goals. Our function in and of itself becomes so complicated because of that reason. The way to make it simple, and Mary and I talked about this about 3 episodes ago, is lock in on those 1 to 3 goals that matter. That's what you should report on. Make it even more simple and make it relative to your business and your marketing strategy, because you're not going to be able to record everything. We would love to record revenue source marketing. Now our clients are there, or for in-house, maybe we don't have that infrastructure yet. So what is it? Maybe it's inbound volume. Maybe it is calls. Maybe it is lead gen. There is no right or wrong answer. But to make it simple for yourself as a performance marketer, lock in onto those 1 to 3 metrics that really matter, and then produce those kind of dashboards and reports. I'll throw it to James.
I guess I think that there's really simply only 2 things that you should be primarily concerned about as a content creator. One of those is how many customers or potential customers see my content and want more of my content. That would be how to judge whether said content is good, in my opinion. The other would be like, are people who consume, can we tell that people who consume our content are better buyers or more willing buyers than people who don't? But like, how do you go about like achieving simplicity in your work? Well, I think one way is to, not take hold of the reins a little bit. Don't let the other people in the organization be making decisions about what your workday is going to look like in December, or what your June workflow is going to look like. Don't let someone else make that decision in December because they're doing this overly detailed annual plan without involving you. Your day will be much simpler if you make sure that you have a place at the content level decision-making table, and that you don't become like a, content farm order taker for other people in your team. It will just make your work simpler, and you'll be able to do the things that are more fun, and you'll be able to do them better. Just the parts of your job that you like, and not the parts of your job that suck. That's what I would say is how to achieve that simplicity. But you should, in my opinion, only be focused on those 2 simple things. Do people want more of my content? And are the people that consume my content more likely to buy, quicker buyers? Is there evidence of this?
It's awesome, James. My takeaway would be find a framework that works for you. So you can steal my 5-step framework if you'd like, and use that to set guardrails on your activities and your tactics. So use that as your big why strategy, and then filter everything through that framework.
Love it, love it, love it. Thank you, listeners. Appreciate you, especially for this episode. I thought it was going to go off the rails, but simply we did it, and I love it. Tune in next week. I'm going to start promoting more of what we're doing ahead of time, but we're going to do TikTok part 2, discussing the execution of it all. We were talking more about the why and the strategic purposes for B2B marketing, but we'll actually talk about how to create them. What levers should you pull while you're doing it? We're going to bring on our dear friend Kevin to talk through that, as he's grown his follower account from 0 to, I believe I've checked today, it was like 48K followers. So he knows a little bit about TikTok, so we're going to bring him on. For everyone else, DM us if you have questions about making the go-to marketing strategy simple, making performance marketing, making content. That's what we're here for, and that's what we really love to do. So give us those DMs, rate this, listen to it on Apple, Spotify. I have it on YouTube slowly. If you like that, let me know. We love some feedback too. But enjoy yourself. Thank you, listeners.